Most founders aren't addicted to winning and success like they'll tell you they are. They're addicted to stress. They're addicted to the cocktail of anxiety, fear, worry, this need to prove myself. And that literally transpires as physical, emotional, psychological stress. That is a powerful, potent recipe for burnout.
Welcome to Executive Edge Live. I'm Harley Green, founder and CEO of Workergenix. At Workergenix, we help high-performing leaders reclaim their time and stay focused on what actually matters, supported by our ultimate executive assistants. Executive Edge Live is one way we support the broader business community, bringing together operators and advisors to talk through what is actually working inside growing companies. Today's conversation is how founders scale without burning out. Most founders build their businesses by staying close to everything, every follow-up, every decision, every moving part. That approach works early on, but as the business grows, it becomes the constraint. The calendar fills up. The inbox never empties, work only moves when the founder pushes it. And the cost is not just time, it's energy, clarity, and the ability to actually lead. So today we're going to dig into what it takes to move out of the middle of daily execution, how to keep the business moving without grinding yourself down to actually lead it. So today we're going to dig in with these panel of experts. And a quick note I want to share before we jump in, this session is also going to be featured on our podcast, Scale Smart, Grow Fast. So if something resonates with you today, you'll be able to revisit it once it's published. Let's get into it and meet our panel. Kim, let's start with you. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Let everyone know where you're coming from and what your business is.
Sure. I'm Kim Giddens. I'm the founder of Personology. I'm a leadership performance advisor and an organizational diagnostician. I work with founders and CEOs and leadership teams when something's slowing and they can't quite name why. Decisions are looping, execution is stalling, too much rooting back to one person. My background is leading organizations of 3,000 people for brands like Anthropologie, Banana Republic, Kohan, high growth stages and transformational pivots. And yeah, that's me. I'm from Hoboken, New Jersey.
Welcome, Kim. Thanks for joining us today. All right, Paul, how about you?
Yes, hello, everybody. My name is Paul Salter. I am a high performance hypnotherapist and mindset coach, and I specifically work with CEOs, executives, entrepreneurs, ambitious professionals who know what to do to either achieve next level success or sustain the current success they have, but they're struggling to do it. So I specifically use hypnosis to help them unlearn the destructive patterns of believing, feeling, thinking, and behaving that keep them stuck and hold them back from achieving their potential. And I work with all of my clients virtually, but I'm happily based in Tampa, Florida.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us today, Paul. I'm excited to hear your insights and ideas. All right, Mike.
I am the second New Jersey person on the panel. My name is Mike Goldman. I help build great leadership teams, and I do that through my keynote speaking. I coach leadership teams, and I've written 3 books. The second book is called Breakthrough Leadership Team. My last book launched in October called The Strength of Talent. Happy to say it made the USA Today bestseller list. And I work with leadership teams because what I have seen over my 35 years coaching and consulting is that as the leadership team goes, so goes the rest of the company.
Thanks for joining us, Mike. All right, everyone, we're just going to jump right in with an open question to the whole panel, and let's get started. When you hear a founder say, I'm burning out trying to keep this thing moving, what is usually really going on underneath?
I'll dive in first. What I've observed in my 17 years of coaching is there's typically a point in the growth process, specifically the rapid growth phase, where a founder starts to get disconnected or out of alignment with their fundamentals. And I'm not just talking the business strategy. I mean, all of us here know there's no shortage of information available in a matter of milliseconds. There's incredible coaches like Mike, consultants and advisors like Kim available to fill those knowledge gaps. But as we continue to go and grow and we taste that next level success, we're rewarded for that ambition, that hustle, that grind. We start to put the original priorities that gifted us that opportunity in the first place on the back burner. We neglect self-care. We neglect sleep, diet, exercise. We neglect those important relationships in our life that were originally our foundation for success. And more often than not, founders are aware of this, but they wear that ambition like a badge of honor. They think it's their separating factor, their superpower. And in fact, it really is until it inevitably becomes their kryptonite. So a lot of my coaching, first and foremost, is reconnecting those individuals to their foundational fundamentals that allow them to have the energy to sustain that rapid ascension of success.
I'll dive in. In addition to, I agree with everything Paul said, is when leaders are kind of burning out trying to get things moving, I feel like, number one, most of the time it's because they are, or at least feel like they are the smartest person in the room. And when you are the smartest person on your team, whether that's true or you just feel that way, we have a tendency to think we've got to do it all ourselves. And that's not a scalable model. That's a model which is going to lead to not only mediocrity, but a whole lot of lack of sleep. The other thing that I see is missing, especially in entrepreneurs that have founded a company, it's now growing and they feel like they're just trying to hold on, is there's no real operating system for the business. Everybody, including them, is just trying to work real hard, get a lot of stuff done, and they're really smart, and that's all great. But there needs to be an operating system, some rhythm of planning and execution and holding each other accountable and long-term strategy and short-term execution. And without implementing a real operating system, everything could feel chaotic. And between I've got to be the smartest person in the room and everything feels chaotic, that's a pretty good recipe for getting burnt out.
I absolutely agree with both of you. And what I have found, especially helping founders who have managed a lot of growth, is that they've become the system. So similar to what Mike shared, but and maybe not intentionally. It happened because they felt like they were the fastest to getting things done, fastest route to getting things done. And now the org has learned how to route around and loop everything back into the founder. And what I've also found that this is happening at the highest levels, large companies. It's something I've seen through my career, 27 plus years of my leadership journey. And this is a very similar thing that happens when people take on additional responsibility and start growing responsibility. And unless they have that architecture, unless they have systems built that work for that company, it will always root back and create burnout.
Mike, I wanted to touch on something you said about feeling like you're the smartest person in the room. And, there's a whole discussion on like hiring and stuff. Do you have like a quick recommendation of, maybe a founder is not going to be able to like replace themselves as the smartest person in every aspect? Are there other approaches they might take to start lifting that burden from their plate?
Yeah, it's a great question because it's an easy thing to say. It's a harder thing to execute on. And one of the things I do when I work with a leadership team, it's one of the first exercises I do. And it sounds very simple and it's not, but it's listing out for your organization, what are all the functions? Head of company is a function. Finance, sales, marketing. What are all the functions? And there's probably 10 to 15 critical functions. And then today, who is accountable for that function? And if you're a very early on founder, your name might go right next to all 15 of those functions. And that's okay. That's part of what we do when we get things started. But you've got to quickly start getting proactive about your team and saying, hey, which of these 15 functions, maybe it's finance, maybe it's marketing, maybe it's technology, which of these functions is one that I'm not great at? It's taken a whole lot of my time and taking me away from building the business. What is that function? If that's finance, then my priority to build a great team, my number one priority has got to be, all right, who can I bring on the team that could be accountable for that finance function? Don't try to build a great team all at once. You can't afford it. Your head will explode. But step by step, what are the functions? Who's accountable? How do we measure success of those functions? And what's the first one I ought to go get at so I could start pulling back and leading versus having to get my hands dirty with everything?
Thanks, Mike, for clearing that up and giving some good practical advice there. The next question I had was directed for you, Kim. You diagnose where leadership execution breaks down in founder-led companies. What patterns do you see most often when growth is making the founder the bottleneck?
So typically I see three patterns that come up most often. The first one I like to call return loop or liken it to like a game of tennis. And that's when decisions just keep landing back on the founder side. And, the idea with tennis is, a really good game. It should be going back and forth. The second one is accountability. And that's when everyone in theory knows who's responsible for what, but in practice, it's still routing back to the founder. And then the third one is the compensating team. And this is generally what we see after a while of the founder bottleneck. And that team is very good at working around the founder. They are working around the gap instead of actually naming the gap. And so instead of using their own strengths or using what they know best, they're starting to hold back and compensating for what the system is actually requiring them to do.
Curious if any of the other panelists have seen similar patterns or anything that they've observed when they see founders becoming the bottleneck.
I mean, I think it comes back to the root of what we've already begun discussing as this inability to delegate, which sometimes may show up or feel like it's perfectionism or it's indecision. But I think at the core of it all is just a lack of trust in others, because logically one might know that if you're able to delegate task A, B, and C, you can scale and go significantly faster. But if the person you delegate to is only going to do 80% of the job that you would be able to do, that feels threatening. You might see it as a threat to your role, your standards, and you can get so lost in that little problem, you forget to see that your big vision requires you to scale and have other individuals working with you to go after the collective goal.
The other thing that I've seen is a total misunderstanding of the job of a CEO. I was with one leadership team and the CEO said to his team, "Hey, my job is to help all of you. Just tell me what you need." And I said, "My God, that's not your job. Your job is not to do everybody else's job. That is not scalable. There is a job of a CEO. The CEO is the chief visionary, is in charge of strategy. I believe the CEO owns culture. The CEO is an ambassador internal in the organization, ambassador external to the organization. CEO's job is to build a great leadership team. There's a specific job of a CEO. And I think for a lot of early on founders and CEOs, they don't quite understand what their job is. So they have a tendency to help everybody else and dig into everybody else's job. And that's just not scalable. And that drives, just being real tired and burnt out at the end of the day.
I wonder, Kim, if that goes back to kind of what you said, one of the patterns you observed of you've got a team, they know their responsibilities, but things keep coming back to the CEO. I wonder if what Paul mentioned too of, the trust of getting something done 80%, maybe that's good enough impacts that. I'd love to hear your thoughts more on, that specific pattern and maybe some strategies that you share to help people get out of that.
I definitely think that's part of it. I also think the flip side, I think the founder can think, well, it's just faster if I do it this time. It will take me too long to train somebody to do it, when in reality, sometimes you need to slow down a little bit to train somebody to do it. One of the things that I have somebody do is think about what's one decision recently, this week, yesterday, today, that came back that shouldn't have come back to you. And what would have had to be true for that decision to be made without you? And within that is the gap. And that's the best place to start, because it's always going to come down to clarity, capability, or trust. So somebody wasn't clear on what they needed to do. They aren't capable, there's a skill gap perhaps, or they're simply not trusting that they'll be able to do it without them.
Harley, I'll add something too, based on what Mike said. Sometimes I've had to ask my clients point blank, are you the best person to be the CEO? Because the skill set required to get a company off the ground and running is night and day different versus, just like Mike described, the skill set required to paint the picture, build the culture, and set everybody else up for success. And more often than not, it becomes an ego issue, an identity threat when someone has founded and started this great company, this great movement, and they're not the best person to keep it moving in that direction because maybe, for example, they love being in the weeds of the tactical hands-on building, that they're neglecting the vision, the culture building, and the leadership. So sometimes it's an honest conversation that's required with a mentor, a coach, somebody you trust, and it's really putting the right person in that seat. And maybe that role changes to president, director of X, Y, and Z. But if you can let go of the ego or that need for validation and attention that typically comes with that CEO label, you can actually get the movement or the business to scale well beyond the original intention.
That reminds me of an article that I've sent to multiple founders, and I'll have to remember, where it came from. But do you want to be a founder or do you want to be the king? And there's usually, if ego and status, if that's the most important thing, then those are, you can make the choice. It's your company.
If you're running a growing company and still handling too many operational details yourself, there's a better way forward. The Delegate or Die checklist shows you the exact tasks that drain leadership bandwidth and the simple changes that recover 15 to 30 plus hours a week. Download it free at workergenix.com/scalesmart. Now let's get back to the episode. Glad you brought that example up of sometimes the best role for the founder is not necessarily CEO. And so this kind of leads into the next question that I had for Mike originally is, your work with CEOs and founders as they're building the leadership teams that can actually carry the business. Where do the founders often go wrong when they're trying to step back?
Well, in addition to stepping back and not knowing what their role is, right, which we've said, it's easy to say, I'm going to step back, but if you don't understand what you should be doing as a CEO, you're not going to step back for long. And then the other mistake I see CEOs make when they step back is in how they pick their team. There's a question I ask a lot of my clients early on when I work with them is I say, if you had a chance to do it all over again, would you enthusiastically rehire everyone on your team? And very often I get kind of, they start to turn green and they don't feel too well, or nervous laughter. And what I realize, it's not because they've got a lot of low performers running around. It's because they've got a lot of folks on their team, including the senior leadership team. They've got a lot of folks that are fine. They're good enough. So they're not doing so bad that I would fire them, but would I rehire them all over again? No, I'd probably want more of a superstar. And leadership team, the first people you surround yourself, the people that are really helping you drive and scale the company. I believe everyone on your leadership team needs to be a high performer. And when I say high performer, I mean a great culture fit and highly productive, culture fit and results. Everyone on your senior leadership needs to be high performing or have the ability to get there in the next 3 to 6 months, or they don't belong on your team. There's just too big an impact they have down and out from the organization. So the mistake I see them make is they believe good enough is good enough. And especially on that leadership team, good enough doesn't get you very far.
When we see oftentimes too with clients that come to Workergenix, they've got these all-star leadership team members, but they're bogged down in low-level admin work. And so making a decision to bring on like a virtual executive assistant can have a real quick productivity boost for those executive leadership team and keep them really highly focused so they are able to be productive and hit those goals that are needed. And Paul, this is something I wanted to talk to you about next is, why do so many high performing founders know exactly what to delegate, but still can't let go? Maybe they have that executive assistant and they really are not letting go of the things that executive assistant should be doing.
Yeah, it comes down to a core belief around trust in other people. And, a good example I can share is I have a client of mine, he's a serial entrepreneur, and his latest endeavor is this, virtual legal software for lawyers and whatnot. And what's interesting is a lot of my work is deep identity level work, going back to childhood to understand when, why, and how some of these perpetuating destructive patterns came to be. And whether we're talking about, lack of trust in others, perfectionism, procrastination, performance anxiety, everything I just mentioned is learned, which means it can be unlearned. So for this particular client, as he hit the 7-figure mark, he was starting to realize that beyond him and his wife and his one VA, the only 3 people in the company, if he wanted to get to that next level, he would have to bring on more talent. And he had a history of cycling through VAs. He had a history of cycling through bringing people on, not only in this business, but his other businesses previously. And as we began to unpack that, it was very clear he did not trust other people. And my job, of course, is to go much deeper. And what we uncovered in our time together was he was raised in a very perfectionistic household. If he didn't bring home the straight A report card, there were consequences. His dad ran a very tight ship with incredibly high expectations. And there were several moments in his younger years when he was tasked with participating in group projects. And he noticed early on, we're talking 9, 10 years old, where he'd be assigned a group project and all of the other kids just took a haphazard approach. They didn't care nearly as much as he did. But he knew if he didn't do well on this group project, there were consequences at home. So, as a result of trying to avoid consequence, get his childhood needs met of acceptance and love by dad, he would do all the work himself. He would get the good grade and everything would be fine and safe at home. But this pattern carried on into college and into his adult years, with the core belief being it's not safe to trust people. So, we had to do the work necessary to create that safety, really revisit and reframe those pivotal moments from his life so he felt more at ease, more patient and diligent in the hiring process and doing his role to not only set that individual up for success, also to give them the space, time, and resources to have success. And through that work together, the team is now at 8 or 9 individuals and they've hit that next milestone and are now in the process of getting ready to sell the company.
Love that story. And speaking of milestones, I love that you mentioned that. One thing we often hear when speaking to leaders is they've got a problem, things are flowing through them, and they're saying, you know what, we'll focus on that when we hit the next milestone. What usually happens when they keep pushing off getting out of being the bottleneck in their business? And this is a open question to the group.
Something I see is the system hardens and the team just gets better at working around what has become the DNA of the company. And the founder and the CEO gets more and more isolated. And the longer this runs, the founder isn't really getting any direct feedback or information. And it's just continuing to spiral. And the longer it runs, it just gets more expensive to interrupt because now you're not just having to fix structure, you're really having to rebuild trust and helping people understand, what ownership is real and what isn't.
What I hear more often than, we'll fix it when we hit the next milestone, the companion kind of mistaken statement, is, yeah, I know I've got to do that, but I have to wait until things calm down. As soon as things calm down. And then my question is, when has anything ever calmed down? And by the way, do you want things to calm down? That's a dangerous time if things calm down. So it's an easy way for a leader to push things off. I'm going to wait until things calm down, but that time never happens. And then to Kim's point, as you push it off, as your company grows, let's assume it is growing, as your company grows, things get more complex. Things get even harder. You dig yourself a deeper and deeper hole. So the best time to solve the problem is typically now and not waiting until some magical day that things calm down.
Most founders aren't addicted to winning and success like they'll tell you they are. They're addicted to stress. They're addicted to the cocktail of anxiety, fear, worry, this need to prove myself. And that literally transpires as physical, emotional, psychological stress. That is a powerful, potent recipe for burnout. But it also really bleeds into not only the business, but it's their personal relationships, their marriage, their relationship with their children. And just like Kim mentioned, the longer they get stuck in that pattern, neurologically speaking, like the neural pathways responsible for feeling all of those things, they just become easier and easier to run. They become so efficient, effective, operating on autopilot that it feels safe to continue to stay stuck in a pattern of whether it be emotional avoidance, anxiety, burnout, overwhelm, or exhaustion. So it really begins understanding how can we learn to not only create safety, but also detach your self-worth from this success or hitting one milestone after the next. And it really instating a core belief that you are a wonderful person, a leader, X, Y, and Z, regardless of a good month or a bad month.
Love the different perspectives and how they tie together on answering that question. Let's make it really practical now. If someone's listening and thinking, my business runs through me and I'm just completely wiped out, where should they actually start this week?
Bias, but hire a coach. Like every single high performing individual should have one or multiple coaches. And, it needs to be business strategy. It needs to be life mindset. You need to have a trusted mentor and advisor where you can go to get honest, real time feedback about what you're doing that's working well and to shine a bright light on some of the blind spots that are holding you back. So I'm a big fan of asking for help accelerates results. So if you're listening right now and you're feeling what Harley just described and you don't have a mentor in your corner, that should be your next first step.
I would first, of course, being a coach, of course, I would agree with that. Had a coach consistently probably for the last 25 years. But I think an additional part of it is the idea of if you believe the whole business is running through you, then that's kind of that's going to self perpetuate. And if you believe the only way I'm going to be successful is kind of through my team and through my people, I think one of the things that's helpful to start putting in place right now is start to learn how to be a better coach. Stop giving advice. Stop answering every question. Because what we're doing when our team comes to us and says, how do I do this? Or I don't know how to do this, or we've got this problem. When you solve the problem, you are training your team to come back to you again and again and again. And you are not helping your team modeling a way of thinking so they could solve the problem next time. So it doesn't all have to go through you. So become a better coach. And being a better coach means asking better questions, questions that help model a way of thinking, questions that help the individual come up with the right action for them versus just grabbing every problem and trying to solve it yourself, because then you're just perpetuating the exact thing you say you don't want to happen.
Yeah. Well, Mike, I really appreciate you bringing up that specific example of how people can change. And I think that's a good segue to the next question I had for everyone, which is just a quick, easy one. Like, what is one habit or mindset shift or operational change that every founder should make if they want to scale without the burnout?
Your calendar is a reflection of what's important to you. And I understand for everybody listening, their business is incredibly important, but their business success is not sustainable if they show up every day operating with an empty fuel tank. So the quick, easy action step here is open up your calendar. It's going to quickly show you how important self-care is, family time, opportunities to rest, recharge, play, and experience life. And you need to put those on your calendar first before you schedule your team meetings, your client calls, your relationship building, whatever it may be, because you can always make time for those. You likely, if you're listening, found it very easy to push off family and to neglect self-care, but that is what's going to allow you to sustain the success that you aspire to achieve.
I love that. And what I have found a lot with busy founders and the fact that it has become a habit is that's why coaching or hiring somebody or hiring even a VA becomes so helpful, because you can really almost delegate that process to help you get into the habit. It's very hard for human beings to change a habit without some level of accountability or partnership with somebody else. And morning rituals, things like that are hugely important.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys sharing those insights, those specific action items. Before we wrap up, if someone wants to reach out or continue the conversation with you, what's the best way for them to connect with you? Feel free to share your website, LinkedIn, whatever's you prefer. We'll start with you, Kim.
Best way to connect with me is either through LinkedIn or my website, personology.com. And it's personology with IE.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. Paul, we'll go to you next.
Yeah, if you've enjoyed this conversation and what I've shared, you'll likely enjoy the podcast I'm the host of, which is called the Unstuck High Performer Podcast. And then on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at the Paul Salter, SALT.
Thank you, Paul. All right. And Mike.
For me, my website is mike-goldman.com. My newest book is The Strength of Talent, How to Grow Your People to Grow Your Profit. And also, as Paul said, if you enjoy this conversation, I have a podcast called The Better Leadership Team Show that I'm super proud of.
Awesome. Appreciate you all. This was a strong conversation. And if there's one takeaway, it's scaling without burnout is not about working harder or finding more time. It's about changing what the business depends on you for. Who owns what, how work moves, what happens when you step away. And if you want help putting this into practice, we created the Executive Efficiency Blueprint to help you turn conversations like this into clear execution and better use of your time. Those of you listening can access it here at workergenix.com/EEB Live. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time on Executive Edge Live and on the Scale Smart, Grow Fast podcast.